Okay. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, from wherever you're dialing in. So, my name is Anbumunee Ponniah. I play the role of a CTO, and I'm a IBM executive architect who's responsible for taking AI-related applications to clients, especially in the domain of supply chain in retail industry, is what my expertise is. With about 24 years of experience with the IT industry and about 12 years of experience with retail itself. So today I will be talking about something that is kind of something that I've been working on for the past 3-4 years, which is to actually demystify what type of trends that industry sees, and also use that to explain to say academia exactly what these trends means in terms of the skills that people should actually get to know, the kind of research probably that the industry is interested in. So, with that in mind, if you actually look into the crystal ball of where the technology trends are going, we may hear many people giving multiple perspectives, but I want to actually channelize all those perspectives and say, here are some of the trends. Here are some of the challenges that each of these trends actually faces, and here are some of the use cases that industry is betting on. And once we come to know of these things, then as a student, as a faculty, as a college, it's easy for each one of us to actually invest in these skills, either from a skills to be ready for the industry perspective, or the projects we want to pursue in collaboration with the industry, or even in many cases research that can be pursued. So that's the intention of the talk, and hopefully everyone would find this useful. So without much ado, let me go ahead with my talk. Let me bring up the slide. Okay, so the slide should be up by now, right? Thanks a lot. And let me, okay. So let's get started, right? We have a, pretty good, timing for this. Okay. So a quick disclaimer, this obviously is information that I've collected from various analysts and, all of those. It should be taken as it is, but then, once we are ready, let's use this information for what it is. Okay. So let's get started with the, right? So unprecedented times, and that's an understatement to say, because we look at this, right? We have so many things coming together. We wouldn't have heard of artificial intelligence and Internet of Things and blockchain just a decade ago, but now things have really exploded. But it's just not in technology side of things. Society in general is getting more and more digitized, and all the governments and regulatory bodies, whether it is business regulatory bodies or governments or other aspects, are all gearing towards this digital reinvention. And this digital reinvention, if we look at it, we had a great time with the internet exploring as an era of information. Potentially this could be the era where the reinvention could unlock a combination of artificial intelligence and various other technologies that are situation already. But then COVID happened, and then that actually, while we believe it has put hurdles on many cases, in case of adoption of technology and application of technology, in many ways it has also accelerated. So really we are at the cusp of something exciting. So what is that we would now talk about is, while there are many things that are going on, we would pick just three of the technology trends that we want to now focus on. Let's see what those three are. So that's what would be today's agenda. I'll cover Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and blockchain. You might have heard from many speakers on this, including my own company from IBM. My colleagues would have talked on parts of this, but I want to give a perspective which identify some of the key trends that, in general, the industry analysts are actually betting on, the industry themselves, the businesses themselves are betting on, and some of the hurdles that are posing challenges for quick adoption of these trends. So knowing those two, we can now look at some of the use cases that industry is interested in. Now, this three together would give you an idea of, in the field of Internet of Things, in the next 5 years, if we look through it, what are the things that we as individuals, as students, as faculty can bet on. And I'll repeat that in all three pillars, right? Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and blockchain. So, upfront, this is not meant to be a primer on what those technologies are, but rather a primer on how those technologies are relevant, and what is the application side of things. Okay, let's get started with Internet of Things. I'm sure many of you are already aware of the Internet of Things as a as a technology, but then there are interesting trends that we see today. Internet of Things. Oops, my apologies for the thing. Today, Internet of Things has a specific adoption, right? Sensors, we start seeing sensors in almost every place. Cars already have sensors which monitors the health of engines. There are sensors that monitor health of people in hospitals. There are even Fitbits and smart watches that. Do you need the YouTube video too? Okay, I can start from where I left, right? Okay. So apologies for the interruption, but then, so the key trends that we are looking at is Internet of Things now being inherent part of the solutions itself, which means the data that is generated from IoT sensors are now going to be planned as part of how it is consumed, how it is managed, how it is governed, how it is protected, how it is validated. Everything now becomes part of the solution. That's one set of things that we are already seeing, early adoption. But then, with the advent of edge as a trend by itself, the edge analytics and AI, right, with the edge playing a key role there, the Internet of Things now can partner with edge related technologies and do a lot more right at the place where it is generating data, rather than bringing all of that over to the central repository. That is another thing. Now that we have IoT sensors, what about master data management for a variety of sensors? That's another trend. That's an interesting trend to actually keep an eye out for. And similarly, we also see a lot of IoT in the assistive technology in terms of healthcare, in terms of training and education, where it is just not something that is providing background sensor information, but it's actually going to be an interactive layer. And it provides the right amount of information for anything, even live, so that an assistive kind of interaction can be enabled, especially this type of a training and education. Imagine we being able to I being remote and being able to control something in a lab experiment, while being remote, and you're all able to participate. It requires a lot of sensors to actually play the role, and we are already seeing some of these in the surgery. The robotic surgery field is actually trying to do these types of assistive, technology. It's actually a bit more advanced than that. But in the long term, I mean, if this is the short and medium term, in the long term, we can actually see there are going to be products, application solution will embed IoT, but at the same time provide itself as a service. Okay, that's again a business side of things. As an IoT engineer, you probably wouldn't always think of it as a service mechanism for sensors of things, which is kind of a difficult thing to wrap our head around. But that's another long-term trend that can come in. And the digital twin is going to be something that is really big. Digital twin, not only of machines, right? Digital twin is a digital copy with key capabilities, features of a particular physical object being represented in a digital world, so that a control of the digital world, not just monitoring of them, a control of a real world thing can be done through this digital twin. Now, this has been attempted with machines, and that's been quite good. But we are anticipating it can actually do it for people, for that matter, and all kinds of processes that even some of the processes that are very interactive and people oriented could actually have a digital twin. And obviously, the security is going to be critical when Internet of Things are there. Then your homes are invaded, your privacy is invaded, and obviously security becomes very critical. And not just that, it is not just private privacy kind of a security, but also confidentiality for governments, for military. Many applications actually have that. Right? Similarly, if you look at it, Internet of Things is not going to have an impact on its own. There's going to be, along with blockchain, along with AI, IoT will have a collective impact, and that we are going to see more and more. Today, we are only, using IoT as a source of information, a data, and maybe put it in a blockchain, and then AI model does on its own. But how about AI and IoT actually doing things together? That's another trend that we are looking at it. Autonomous vehicles, and there is a reason why I put it in the long term rather than the short medium term. It actually exists today to some extent, but then truly self-driving, self-managing kind of vehicles is probably a long-term trend, and we'll continuously see some kind of a growth there. So that's something it's worth now that we have some trends in front of us, let's see what could be stopping us from adopting things, right? First and foremost, we need to, before we get there, I almost forgot about that. Obviously, 5G and edge has a big role to play for IoT to be successful. So why edge? I think this is something that all of us would already be aware of. You can minimize network latency because edge is going to take computing to the data rather than data to the computing, which means we can scale better, we can expand our reach, right? If I have to deploy a server to reach to far corners of rural India, it's probably going to be a logistics nightmare to do that. And it's probably costly to do that. But Edge could enable simple Raspberry Pi to be installed in a village, and it's able to provide information about agricultural fields around is a possibility. And hence, those types of things is going to really come up with. And because the data doesn't leave far away from where it is getting generated, maybe our compliance landscape will change together, right? So many of the regulatory hurdles which doesn't allow for data to be taken to a central server far off from where it is generated. It could be for competitive reasons or privacy security concerns could now be circumvented. So that's something also to keep in mind. But these key barriers do exist. And key for the audience today is obviously the skills, right? We know that there's a lot of skills related to the sensor and the engineering aspect of the IoT, but then how those IoT sensors actually play in the platform services or application, or some of the dimensions like security, that the skills around that, how IoT plays in the real world is a skill that is very important for everyone to pick up. And that's currently, a lot of our customers, our analysts are also saying that that's something, there's an 80% gap of availability of skills who can map an IoT engineering knowledge into an industry application. Similarly, we need to know, because IoT sensors are not going to be deployed on its own, they're going to be deployed along with these adjacent technologies like blockchain and AI. And it's while we kind of know how they will leverage IoT, now we need to start thinking about how would IoT leverage that, right? and this governance and control plane through which all of this is getting controlled, for example, to enable compliance, and which means we need to be audit ready, and make sure there is all dimensions of security during transit, during storage, during generation, so that people cannot access it without authorization, proper authorization. All of that needs to be managed, and IoT actually, the scale at which these security challenges come in is at a completely different level. And again, these barriers also exist. Now, IoT is considered part of an architecture of an overall solution, but architectures in today's software engineering are not architected around IoT. So if you make IoT as one of the central pieces or key pieces of data sources, instead of putting them into a small box and assuming you don't have to worry about any of the architectural aspects, is a fallacy that many of us fall into. And again, that is another barrier to overcome. So the right context in which IoT needs to be, adopted is still being worked upon by the industry. And any work that students can do around these areas is always valuable, right? Some use cases that is interesting for IoT, if you look at them, I think it's pretty normal. Typical use cases will always be some kind of a sensor to monitor some kind of a KPI. For example, in a smart factory, the sensor is put on machines, and the machines are monitored for whether they are going to get into a maintenance schedule, or if the belt on the machine is getting a bit lax, or the RPM is bit off. Those types of things can be monitored, and the KPIs are related to either the productivity of the machine or the health of the machine. Such are the KPIs, and it can be for factories, it can be homes, any kind of air conditioning system, those types of things. But there are multiple use cases around that, and many of us may be aware of that. However, IoT has a critical role to play as a bridge between real and digital worlds. For example, remote surgery is something, and various other assistive technologies, right? Maybe the assistive technologies are relevant for not just information dispersal, right? Even for a government to act on behalf of or provide the services to its citizens. It can be a bank teller providing services. It can be a restaurant providing services. There's a lot of real versus digital world, and the digital twin is going to probably have a big role on the objects there. At the same time, how do you use IoT for verifying digital identity is something that is coming up. It's just not RFID badges that we probably have in our pockets when we go to various places, but thing as an identity is something that I want you folks to actually search the internet and find more about it. And what will really take to create a digital twin of a person? Is it just an online avatar, or is it it's just not an Instagram account anymore? If you put IoT sensors and a digital twin of a person, you actually have a multidimensional view of a person, and there's going to be very intrusive also, right? So there is a lot of things that needs to be balanced there, something to think about. Now, obviously, automation, it's we are going to see more and more automation. Any ideas and research related to automation is going to benefit from IoT. It can be smart robots in huge warehouses. We see many of the top retailers around the world, or it can be autonomous tech, like autonomous cars and autonomous trucks and things like that. So that's the Internet of Thing, and so let's let's move on to the next one. So IoT is kind of the context that is very important. It's going to have a very important role to play in our life going forward. But more so is AI. Artificial intelligence is the buzzword. It's a fancy thing that everybody seems to talk about. Even your mom or grandmom who wouldn't have known about cell phones not too long ago would probably talk about artificial intelligence. Might have heard about it in news and other ways. In some form or the other, we are all users of artificial intelligence. It touches our life, be it just maps in our mobile phone or the voice assistants and stuff like that. But there are some interesting trends that is also going to play in the artificial intelligence. Number one that you might have heard some of my colleagues speak about is the whole idea of artificial intelligence takes away some of the explainability of decisions being made by machines. Right? We write a program, there is a logic of why a program does. If you feed in a data, it does something with the data. There is logic of why. But if AI algorithms are actually doing that, that logic is not easily explainable. In that case, there is explainability of AI. Now, once that also comes into picture, there is also what type of information AI uses to actually arrive at that decision has to follow some ethical standards. That's very critical. We cannot use biased data to arrive at some AI models. We know that data is the king in AI, and bias models, do not generalize well and give wrong inputs. That's fine, but there is also an ethical implication of using such data. From where do we source data? Just like we have ethics in responsible sourcing of diamonds or food or anything like that, there is also responsible sourcing of data. Did we get the consent of the person who needs to provide the data? Those levels also needs to be thought, and there is a lot of research going into that aspect. Obviously, we already saw the edge analytics and AI. I'm repeating that so that it gets reiterated. I think there is confluence of edge 5G bringing in IoT plus AI. All of this is going to come in together, and I'll also talk about how blockchain is going to fit into this. Intelligent decision systems that are for more industry type of use cases, where a lot of these processes, for example, we want to do customs clearance for a particular container that arrived at the port in, let's say, Chennai. So what type of decisions are there related to customs clearance process, the safety checks and quality checks of the products that arrived, what is the right the process of actually bringing that to either a warehouse or the final destination, where else should it get forwarded, what's the cost of it. There are so many decisions that are made for every single item that we now consume. So a global supply chain requires a lot of these automation, and intelligent decision systems kind of help us get there. So with that, we see a lot AI playing a big role in that. And there's an interesting thing about auto annotation. So when you go for intelligent decision system, there are a lot of domain related concepts that needs to be incorporated into AI. For that to happen, a lot of your heuristics data about the domains now need to be modeled into various ontologies and various sources, ground truths for you. Just a minute. And for that to happen, obviously some annotations would help. And today we have to rely on experts manually annotating so many things. So can we do auto annotation? What does it take to do auto annotation? It's not just kicking the can, as we say, to actually, we will say that we automate, but we make the next level of what information that auto annotation algorithm uses, that requires manual. Right, so we just make something else manual and make this auto. No, that's not the point, right? The auto annotation actually is able to continuously learn once you set it up. That's another interesting, journey to have. On the long term, there's going to be smart robots, fluid AI, and general intelligence. Smart robots is, very much people can relate to. It's something where autonomously robots for various purposes. The robots need not be, Terminator type of robots. It can be a simple robot that does one job and only one job. It can be just opening a door, for that matter, or it can be just driving a car, kind of. Even that is, some kind of a smart robot. It's not just the human face type of a robot we are talking about here. But there are many situations where, let us say, in a factory floor, a robot now needs to make decisions on when a particular, let us say it is an iron ore processing factory, and based on the temperatures, there are some, some anomalies found in the quality of the iron ore. There are decisions being made related to what would that iron ore be used for. Would it be the high quality steel? Many things. And then robots need to now pick them and take it to the right destinations. And smart robots need to navigate the complex the very very hard situations in an iron factory, right? The smelt factory with the temperature and many things going on. Can they navigate on their own is also some kind of a smartness. Fluid AI is something that is very interesting to think about. Now today, if we have an AI to drive an robot arm to pick up two blocks and stack on top of each other, we can perfectly do it. Let's say we have 5 blocks and we want to now point a camera at it. You want to count the blocks, obviously edge detection, and you can do that. Now let us say we want to know, are there more smaller blocks on top of bigger blocks? Imagine this particular line. Let's say we have 5 blocks of varying sizes. Somebody needs to categorize them as small versus big and categorize on which it is sitting on top of, right? That's an interesting thing. Now, how easy it is for me to remove the fourth block and how quickly I need to remove so that the fifth block on top of it does not topple over. If I ask this question to an AI, can an AI actually arrive at an answer? It requires many algorithms, many thought processes there. Those types of problems is what fluid AI means, which means there is some general concepts in our ground truth. Can it derive further concepts? Is something that will be an interesting long-term view on AI. And then overall, there is general intelligence itself. This is what we keep hearing about in popular fiction, where self-aware AI and stuff like that. But a general intelligence similar to a human is probably a decade or more away. We are actually thinking maybe it will be 2040 plus when it will eventually happen. But if you think about it, we are now solving narrow AI problems. AI is used for one purpose and one purpose only. It can analyze a photo, it can recognize people in the photo based on some metrics, some features that it identifies. That level, it's very efficient. In fact, it is more efficient than even humans in some cases. But a broad AI can solve, just like fluid AI can actually derive concepts out of it. And a general intelligence can actually learn things, create new ways of solving things. It's more the free thinking type of intelligence. So those are all the long term ones that we look at. Now let's look at some of the barriers that we need to work on. While we hear about AI everywhere, right? We see AI everywhere, doesn't mean AI is as prevalent. Actually, there is an opportunity that we haven't really unlocked. The problem is we all hear about the consumer part of AI. Things like our social networking platforms, things like mobile phones, things like what we interact with. And believe it or not, actually 80% of the data is with enterprises. They have been collecting data since 1960s when mainframes have been around. So over 60 years of data, and we are continually multiplying, and only 15-20% of that data is even made available for AI. Imagine the full potential if you are able to unlock all that full data. So that's something to keep in mind. So data is important. Data is really one of the hurdles of AI. We don't get good quality data. We don't get data. In some problems we don't get data. Period. We have to do with either simulated data or partial data, and that's always going to be a problem. And data quality is also a big problem. That's one side. Talent is another problem, where we currently have a lot of people, enthusiasts who learn Python, who learn the right libraries, are able to piece together some algorithms and get their hand dirty and are able to solve one particular pointed algorithmic problems. That's not sufficient. there is talent required for how to architect for AI, how to design user experience for AI. What's the right mechanism to use to explain AI? Right? How do I convey the results of AI? It just cannot be in your Jupyter notebook the graphs that you have drawn. It needs to actually be thought in terms of the experience of AI is different. The architecture of AI is different. There is testing of AI. How do you validate? It's just not your train and test data being run into till you hit some scores and some metrics. That's not good enough. Now you need to actually look at validation from a broader view, from a business process that is getting transformed by AI. So those types of skills are also there. There are, for that matter, even there is MBA, the Masters in Business Administration, for running organizations, departments, or even managing projects. So there are managerial talents related to AI that needs to be taken into account. So talent is another big thing that is currently stopping us. Today, it is a lot of these enthusiast developers doing experiments in a closed environment. If you want to break it open and make it wide adoption of AI as a pervasive technology through and through, we need to build this type of talent. Still people are having doubts about AI and its trustworthiness, because there's some level for people who are unaware, magic happens, right? So we still need to address that trust related issue. One thing my company does is, obviously, explainability of AI is now getting popular, but then more needs to be done, right? So these are some of the hurdles that we need to overcome. With that in mind, there's many use cases of AI. I mean, AI is something that if I ask any of you who's listening in, you'll be able to come up with at least 20 use cases. If you think for maybe 5 minutes, right? So there is almost every industry is affected by AI. There is nothing that is not going to be affected by AI. That's probably an easy way to say it. But some of the use cases that is interesting is probably I'll look at some of those. Right. Overall, you would see modeling of various aspects of a business process, whether it is risk, whether it is KPIs, whether it is outcomes, is one set of AI. Modeling for optimization, right? Solving optimization problems, solving efficiency problems. There is one another bucket of things. Then, identifying anomalies, checking, looking for disruptions, and then predicting such disruptions and proactively taking measures to course correct. Those types of family of AI is also there. And we already saw intelligent decision systems, which is kind of an overarching kind of things, which end to end all kinds of decisions can now be executed through AI. Is also there, right? So you can look at it and from this perspective. There is, in general, how do you model various aspects of business process, use such modeling for efficiency and optimization type of applications, and you also do some kind of a prediction to manage disruptions and also proactively take actions for it. So in there, if you look at these three buckets, they are going to apply for almost every industry that we come across. So I will not bore you guys with all these use cases, but overall, if you look at it, it is going to be the broad buckets are going to be around that, with a bit of security thrown in. Obviously, that is going to be there, with a bit of personalization thrown in. Either the personalization is for the persona which is consuming it. For example, in education, it could be the teacher, the person who's delivering lectures, or it could also be the student, or it could also be the examiner. Each of them is a persona, and each of them require a different AI solution. So that's something to keep in mind. So do not think of an AI as a data unlocking one or two values to it. If you actually look at the consumers of this data from the outside in perspective, there are so many opportunities, because there are so many individuals, persons, consuming this data and its outcomes. And also there are so many systems. All of this needs to be addressed. Okay, let's move to the last one. I think we are good on time now. So let's look at blockchain. So if you look at IoT, it kind of is it's the data. AI is kind of the new age logic. You can think of that that way. Census data is going to be pervasive everywhere. New age way of looking at logic is no longer C, C++, Java. It's AI in the technology of your choice, and in which case, what is our the underlying, where will all this data reside? That can be blockchain. Again, this is something that again is very popular. We would have heard of Bitcoin, but we have moved way ahead of what Bitcoin probably was envisioned for. There are so many frameworks. We'll look at some of them now. Some of the trends, we all know what blockchain is. Blockchain provides a distributed ledger which works based on a quorum of consensus. That's probably the simplest way to describe it. But for the consensus to happen, people who agree for that mechanism of consensus need to be part of that network participating in that with that blockchain, right? What they contribute, how they are given the authority to be the quorum to vote yes or no, all of these require some kind of a mechanisms. Consensus today is either quorum based, right, where we say that minimum these many network participants need to do it, or in case of large network we actually designate at least three of the higher level network participants needs to do. There are consensus mechanisms like that. Just like the various ways network analysis has taken us into various directions, even consensus mechanisms needs a lot of research there. And how do you actually model a physical asset that is outside, or a digital asset that is outside, to be tokenized and stored in the blockchain instead of dumping the entire data into blockchain? Because blockchain is not meant to be a storage repository of sorts. So if I have a purchase order which probably has for a aircraft manufacturer, a purchase order could have thousands of lines, each having lots of details about the product, about the price, about the inventory, many things, right? All of that dumping into blockchain probably doesn't make sense, but is there a way to tokenize them? That's again a good thing to look at. Now, how will blockchain actually react to IoT type data? Would IoT actually cannot, I mean, obviously IoT cannot just keep on streaming its information into blockchain, but how exactly would it work? For that matter, how would blockchain leverage AI, or how would AI leverage blockchain? Both of those are also something that is important in the long term. And companies like myself already are working on this, but there is going to be further research on proof of compliance. You guys may already know that there is a zero knowledge proof, right? Idea is, if you have two parties and the second party needs to verify the first party, without knowledge of the first party, can we do it? For example, I go to a bank, they need to verify that I'm qualified for a loan, but can they do that without accessing all the personal details of me? Today, I need to give my Aadhaar card, I need to give my tax number, PAN number, everything. Copies of that is actually stored in the in the bank itself. The second way is you actually do it as a DigiLocker, where there is a token generated and somebody else is actually doing it. But can we now do it into a zero knowledge proof? Again, that's something worth searching on and knowing more about. I encourage everybody to learn on that. And now ledger as a DBMS, I said in the short medium term that probably it is not useful for dumping everything into a blockchain ledger as a storage model. But what type of database management systems now need to be incorporated into the blockchain so that the blockchain's inherent characteristics remain while we are able to actually keep some of the data? Do we separate it? Do we have a B tree which is having part blockchain and part storage? Interesting problems to solve. And postpartum change, right? We currently have to set up change, dump everything, and then leverage all the benefits of blockchain. Can we now create change in retrospective? That's a very interesting thought process to look at. So I encourage all of you to look at that. But what are the key hurdles here, right? Obviously, there are so many frameworks. Which of these frameworks is going to win? Right? Bitcoin started it. Obviously, that's not a framework, but then there is Ethereum, there is Hyperledger, there is Quorum, and there are at least 20 others that I know of, and maybe there are more. How do we actually work with all these framework? Maybe the concern is how do I do interoperability, because one company may adopt one framework, another may adopt another framework, one country may adopt a framework which is different than other country. Then what do we do, right? There is a lot of such things are happening, and people who are familiar with the India chain should look into how those decisions are made there. There are regular concerns about security and skills, same as before, right? Obviously, that plays over and over again. Here also, for blockchain, it is not somebody able to open a blockchain, right? Create a block, dump it there, read it back, or create a simple consensus mechanism through some framework. Yeah, obviously that is important. Development aspect is important, but how would this entire blockchain be modeled for a particular business process is again somebody needs to describe. So I request everybody to actually invest in the context of use of blockchains also, right? There are concerns about regulatory and confidentiality. The confidentiality problem is who should be part of a consortium of blockchains. Let us say we have automobile manufacturers. Can automobile manufacturers, competitors of automobile manufacturers, be part of the same consortium? Maybe they wouldn't want, right? Because a particular automobile company may actually interact or have a particular supplier with some specifications. If that is in the blockchain, then they may not feel comfortable, even if we say that it is all encrypted, it is very nicely fenced. They may not feel comfortable that a competitor is also there in the same consortium. How do we manage that? How do we do that distributed ownership? And especially in the sensitivity of competitive information is again something that people are, that is what is stopping people from adopting blockchain regularly. Regulatory concerns, now once you put it, can, for example, a central vigilance committee come and verify in a blockchain that your procurement was actually valid, right? Was properly done. There was nothing that is out of place. Can IT department come and verify that your GST calculation and right payment and timeliness and all of that can be verified? That requires them to be part of the blockchains. Then how many blockchains will they be part of? Can they just have one blockchain, right? So some of these problems are also there. So keep that in mind, and with that, let's look at the use case. This is kind of the last slide. We are at the 6:45 hour, but overall digital process automation is going to leverage blockchain a lot. What I mean to say is when process automation is happening, we trying to write back the transaction decisions to a DBMS that is centrally located may not be possible, especially in a global scenario, right? That a lot of applications are distributed. And hence, blockchain could actually be one of the key participants of this automation journey. Again, blockchain plus AI, blockchain plus IoT type of things we are going to look at it. For example, can blockchain record stuff, and from the recording, can AI, do some prediction? The other way to look at it is there's a bunch of information coming in. Can AI be the decision maker to what type of chains and what type of quorums to be formed? Can that flexibility be inbuilt into the blockchain ecosystem? So such use cases are also being explored right at this point in time. So, and then product and service provenance, and people might have heard Atmanirbhar Bharat requires provenance of proving the provenance of from where a particular product is coming from. If somebody says this is a Nilgiris tea or an Assam tea, can somebody actually prove it, right? Those types of use cases. supply chain monitoring, asset tracking, and fleet management is very intuitive for many of us. If trucks are there, we know where it is. Today, we know where a Uber or a Ola cab is based on its GPS location. Similar GPS locations are there for fleets of trucks. So those types of things are already there from a tracking perspective. But a key information is, let us say a truck is coming into the port to pick up a container. They are measured on whether they arrived on time, and they might have reached the gate on time, but the queue in the gate is actually stopping them from entering into the port. At that moment, the fleet can actually monitor and write into the blockchain that they actually arrived but are delayed for some other reason. So those types of things blockchain can actually help. Similar to other asset tracking also, if my company gives me a computer, where I take the computer may decide whether my company can get special economic zone benefits or not. So fencing, those type of sensors will be there from IoT, but whether I have never left the SEZ zone or not can only be proven by the blockchain. So that's where things fit in, right? So if you look at it, sensors provide the general fence. AI provides what are all the various places I normally go and whether the fence I'm crossing or not. That assessment can be done through AI, and then blockchain provides the provenance. So it nicely brings all of this. We had today. It was a whirlwind tour of lot of industry, use cases and some trends that are interesting from an industry perspective. Hopefully that made you think a little bit more on these technologies, not use them as a simple library that you just need to develop some code to interact with, but now look for projects and look for experiences that does more than that. Whether you're looking to launch your own startup or you want to launch your career in the industry, these perspectives could really help each of you. So with that, I would like to thank you for your time, and I appreciate any feedback that you can provide, and any questions are there, obviously do share via the Google form that would have been shared with you. With that, thanks a lot, have a good evening, and I will just stay on some time to quickly check on the questions, and if there are questions I will answer them for the next 10 minutes or so. Okay, so in the order in which questions have arrived. Okay, so there's Spurti from Kanpur has asked the question. I'm a G2E developer. Which is most important to adopt, AI, blockchain, or IoT, to imbibe and stand with current trends in the future, or any other to learn? So I'll answer it this way. It's a very good question, because when we are gaining some skills, there's always so many things going on that it is hard for us to pick one. But the beauty of this new era of digital reinvention is, you start with one, automatically it pulls the other. So I would always say that all three are very important to the industry. Pick one, make that as your specialization, right? What I always tell my mentees is that you have to lead with something. What is it that you lead with? If you lead with blockchain, you can always use IoT and AI as your assistance in your leading, right? But your core capability is blockchain. Each of those has niche areas to play. That said, AI is kind of pervasive and also crowded. So if you want to differentiate yourself in something, again, you can use AI plus something. So I always encourage everybody to go for that plus something. That plus something can be the context. Maybe you are aware of industry, right? Maybe you've done one course on a particular industry, or it is another technology like blockchain and IoT. Hopefully that answers your question. So it's not one versus the other. Pick what resonates with you, right? You can actually, some of us can quickly, imagine the blocks of chains. That's how our mind is. We can imagine, lakhs and millions of sensors. That's how our mind is. AI, we are more into that algorithmic modeling and optimizations and those types of things. Now, each of those resonates with somebody, but I recommend that you start with something and add one more so that your context is what really sets you apart. Okay, so let's go to the next question. Right. What is the future career perspectives that can be expected? For example, for a BE, CSE, or an MBA graduate, in especially in the medical field, right? So medical field is actually it is really interesting. Earlier on, when I used to be in the college, only way you will get into a medical field as an engineer is if you did bioinformatics or the medical systems related. Machines and those types of things, type of course you had done, specialization you had done. But now that's not the case, right? Computer is pervasive everywhere. AI is pervasive everywhere, whether it is medicine, pharmaceutical side of analysis, medicine as a diagnostic procedure, medicine as a caregiving procedure, medicine as a administrative thing. All of this has big roles to play in terms of computers related fields. And I especially see AI and IoT having a huge role to play, and blockchain is going to be the only way we can have provenance in industry, insurance, and provenance in treatment. For example, when COVID vaccine comes, how do you prove that a particular person has already taken the vaccine or not? Arogya Setu app we have, but what are other means we can do it? So blockchain obviously needs to be behind the scenes on there, those types of things. So and hence there is going to be a big role that these technologies are going to play in any field, and medical field. It's already we are seeing these things happening. As an MBA graduate, obviously your awareness of medical field more from an administrative and a business aspect of the medical field of hospitals, of pharmaceutical factories, of as a business is definitely going to be there, but more as a personalized caregiving and management of these projects, even from a computer engineering perspective, is also going to be there. So both are there. So there's one question on whether Industry 4.0 and popular technology has any overlap from Mr. Chandrasekhar and Vellore. So obviously yes. So Industry 4.0 is what unlocks for the industry the use of IoT and blockchain and AI. So clearly, Industry 4.0 as a concept is what is the driver for businesses to adopt these technologies. So yes, I did not give that context of it, but thanks, Mr. Chandrasekhar, for providing that context. So whoever is interested can look up on Industry 4.0, cognitive enterprises, and things like that. How really automation is making a big role here. How digitization is making a big play for the future of industries. It's worth actually looking at it. Right. Right, next question. Okay. What are the three main areas of research in blockchain plus AI? So clearly, we have different buckets of research that I recommend. Nishant from Vadodara